Welcome to The Truth in Crisis. I'm Don Pinnell. We have shown the first 3 segments of our documentary examining the ongoing controversy surrounding the message of Fatima. On last week's episode, we touched on how Russia will spread its errors and asked the question, why has the consecration not been done? We will be hearing from Father Nicholas Gruner as he comments on this segment of the documentary. So now The Truth in Crisis presents the conclusion of Heaven's Key to Peace.
One part of the story of Fatima has been locked away from public view by those in power at the Vatican. That portion is known as the Third Secret.
Fatima scholars believe unanimously that the secret begins with the one sentence, "In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved," etc. End quotation. The etc. indicates that the Virgin at Fatima had a lot more to say about this subject of dogma, but the obvious implication of the statement that in Portugal the dogma of the faith will always be preserved is that elsewhere the dogma will not be preserved.
As long as I hold on to the dogma of the faith, I'm a Catholic. But if I lose the faith by following the bad example or the bad advice of cardinals or even a pope, then I leave the church because I've no longer held on to the Catholic faith. So the integrity of the church itself, in itself, is not in question, but the integrity of people's faith and their salvation is definitely in question.
And Fatima scholars unanimously concurred that this third secret, of which that sentence is the beginning, refers to a crisis of faith and discipline in the church that would begin around 1960. Why do I say 1960? Because when Sister Lucy was asked about when the secret would be revealed, she said that Our Lady wished it to be revealed upon her death, but in no event later than 1960. And when asked why 1960, she said, because it will be clearer then.
On June 26, 2000, Vatican officials released what they said was the entire Third Secret of Fatima, but the published documentation does not include any of the words of Our Lady of Fatima that are indicated by the mysterious etc. The missing words have never been released.
The Third Secret, of course, according to the research that has been done, Cardinal Oddi believed that it tied in with the present crisis of faith and also with the problems of the Second Vatican Council. Sister Lucy asked Our Lady, why not until 1960? And she said, because by then it'll be clearer. So the message of the Third Secret was supposed to be not only for 1960, but something that will be clear in 1960. And what we had going on in 1960 was the preparations of Vatican II. And Cardinal Oddi said that if John the 23rd had found something positive about Vatican II or his way of doing things in that secret, he was a very optimistic fellow. You would have bet he would have revealed it. And the fact that he didn't say anything means it probably had things he didn't like. Not that he's going to say that the Fatima apparition was not true, but things that he didn't like, things that didn't square with the direction he was taking the church at the time.
The Catholic Church exercises a profoundly positive effect upon mankind. And therefore I viewed with increasing dismay the dismantling of the Catholic faith in the aftermath of the Second Vatican Council.
The statement was made that at the latest, this third part of the message of Our Lady at Fatima, the so-called Third Secret, had to be revealed no later than 1960. When Pope Pius XII died in 1958 and his successor, Pope John the 23rd, opened the Third Secret and read it, he said, this is not for our time. And went on to inveigh against the prophets of doom and gloom that were always forecasting dark clouds over the horizon of the latter part of the 20th century. And he, on the other hand, felt that our attitude had to be very upbeat, very optimistic. Man is getting better and better. We're seeing the evolution of mankind to higher and higher levels of morality. I'm still looking for evidence of that, but maybe more sophisticated and highly technologically advanced ways of doing evil, certainly we have. But he, again, felt, for whatever reasons, ultimately known only to himself, that the revelation of the content of this message should not be done. Now, you can read various interpretations of his failure to do his duty there. But his successor, Pope Paul VI, made exactly the same political decision, and so too did John Paul I in 1978 and John Paul II as well.
Since 1960 to this day, the full text of the Third Secret has not yet been released by any of the popes. Will Pope Benedict XVI continue the disastrous policy of not releasing the Third Secret?
Our Lady of Fatima said, "If my requests are granted, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If my requests are not granted, Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, raising up wars and persecutions against the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, various nations will be annihilated."
This is the world that we live in. We continue to fight. $798 billion spent in 1 year by third world countries for weapons, while their own people starve and live in fear. The death rate in our world continues to move at a staggering speed. Our religious leaders watch with sadness as new wars are protested through weak and ineffective means. Conflict and the threat of conflict are the most common media images we see in every corner of the world. In the farthest reaches of the planet, people who have no food have no difficulty finding a gun. The United Nations waves the dove of peace over children who live in poverty. We fill our bellies from our plentiful resources and send some of our leftovers to the starving millions. We have felt the sting of anger and hatred on our own soil and have responded with anger and hatred in a cry for justice. For the loss of 2 buildings, we have seen the fall of 2 entire nations. Whether that is right or wrong is irrelevant. The truth is that the circle of violence is still unbroken. Can we breathe a sigh of relief as we end another war and cast down another madman when we fear that there will be another lurking around the next corner? Peace has eluded us like the wind. We can touch it with our fingertips, but we cannot hold it in our hands. Peace and goodwill were offered to all mankind, but we have been such fools as to let it slip away.
The United Nations has supposedly been formed for the purpose of bringing peace to the world through dialogue, negotiation, and diplomacy, but without significant lasting results. Peace marches have been prolific in every corner of the world. The cry for justice and peace has been paraded through our streets with shouts against injustice, conspiracy, and warmongering from the mouths of people without power, without influence, and often even without credibility. Since the United Nations proves itself to be largely ineffective to bring peace, then how can we expect loosely organized peace rallies to bring true peace to our warring world? America is arguably the most powerful nation in the world, and yet for all her strength, she cannot enforce peace on the entire planet. Does Russia truly have a diabolical future agenda to lie in wait and pounce on a world that is weak? Does the Church hold the final secret to world peace? Can the Pope, through one single action prescribed in Fatima in 1917, bring true lasting peace to our world? Shouldn't we at least try it?
How much can we believe that we'll have world peace just basing it on human beings and on humans' words? We have been so many times disappointed, even now, by promises and things and utopias and things like that. So I still think that it's probably more reliable what the Virgin said, than what some of our chief of states say right now.
I think it's very important for mankind as a whole for the Church to take everything that was said at Fatima seriously.
If the consecration of Russia were to be performed, if it will be performed as Our Lady of Fatima requested, according to her specifications, we will avoid all of the chastisements and punishments that were threatened in the message of Fatima, including the annihilation of entire nations. This will be avoided. We have the promise that if this consecration is performed, what we have to gain is the conversion of Russia and world peace. These things have been promised by Our Lady of Fatima, just if the Pope and the bishops will perform this act of consecration. So, if that's all that heaven is requiring, then why not just do it?
So what I would say to a non-Catholic watching this program is, whether you believe it or not, it costs you nothing to suggest that perhaps the Pope ought to mention Russia in a ceremony consecrating Russia. Let's just see what happens. The approach that I would take with a non-Catholic is, what have we got to lose? I don't think any reasonable non-Catholic would object to this ceremony being conducted if there was one chance in a zillion that it would produce world peace. So, Catholic or not, the answer is, what have we got to lose?
If we only look at the last century, we have not had peace in the last century. Wars are going on and on and on. Our Lady of Fatima came and gave us the means for peace, which is the collegial consecration of Russia to be done by the Pope in union with all the bishops of the world. And she said then we would have a period of peace. Since we don't have this period of peace, we can assume that the only way we are going to get this period of peace is for this consecration to be done.
Now, what's it cost? It costs nothing. Nothing of effort, nothing of time, nothing for them to do it. Instead, if they don't do it, the costs are enormous. If they do it, all the benefits. They get world peace handed to them on a platter.
Normal people, people on the street, ordinary people should be asking their bishops, should be saying, why aren't you doing this consecration? Why don't we try it? Let us see if it gives us peace. Our Lady has promised it. What have we to lose? Go and work with the Pope, go and do the collegial consecration of Russia, and let's see if we get peace. We've tried everything else and it's not working.
All mankind yearns for peace. People have always yearned for peace. But the notion that we can achieve peace without divine assistance is a grave error.
Why not just try it? You've tried everything else. The United Nations doesn't work. Well, it's godless anyway. The peace treaties don't work. The papal visits don't work. He goes to the Holy Land and they say, oh yes, Holy Father, we'll live together in peace, and he leaves and pow, 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 pow. Starts all over again. Papal trips don't work. Papal trips are much more expensive than just consecrating Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary and ordering all the bishops to do it in their cathedral. Doesn't even cost much. Just a letter sent out. You can do it by email, for goodness sakes. Why not just do it? I don't know. I don't know why they don't do it. There's nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Our world seems to be spinning out of control. All solutions to the problem of world peace have failed, and the growing spectre of violence hangs over us all. Yet the devotees of the message of Fatima persist in their belief that the words of the message contain the key to peace in our warring world, even if much of the leadership of their own church has abandoned the message in its pursuit of a more modern, worldly orientation. We are all aware of the bevy of apocalyptic prophecies concerning the future of humanity. Are we also aware that we are creatures of intelligence and choice? The millions of Catholics who still adhere to the message of Fatima in the midst of their troubled church insist that the choice for peace is as simple as a brief public ceremony prescribed by the Blessed Virgin and confirmed by an unprecedented public miracle. In a world gone mad, in which every avenue to true peace seems to lead to only further violence and bloodshed, these Catholics pose a challenge as simple as the message to which they cling. What have we got to lose by taking the Virgin's advice? You decide.
Let's join Father Nicholas Gruner in a roundtable discussion of this clip from Heaven's Key to Peace.
Hello, I'm Chris Ferrara, and I'm here today with Father Nicholas Gruner and John Venari. The three of us were privileged to be part of the documentary of which you've just seen the fourth and final segment in our continuing series of shows presenting this documentary on Heaven's Plan for Peace. And the theme of this segment was, why not try it? Before we answer that question, why not try it? What have we got to lose? Let's also talk about something else mentioned in this segment. Why hasn't it been tried? There was reference in this segment to the third secret, which begins with the momentous phrase, "In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved," etc. And the interviewees during that segment talked about how Sister Lucy said in 1960, that is the year the secret should be revealed. When asked why, she said, because it will be clearer then. And we know that around 1960, and beginning with the Second Vatican Council and thereafter, all hell quite literally broke loose in the church, so that Paul VI himself was forced to say, a few years after Vatican II, the opening to the world was followed by a veritable invasion of the church by worldly thinking. What happened?
He also talked about Satan entering the...
And the smoke of Satan entering the church.
Yes.
So what does the third secret have to do with this and with the failure to try what heaven recommends in the message of Fatima? What would you say, Father?
Well, first of all, the third secret we know from Cardinal Chappie. First of all, we know a lot about the third secret. We know what it says, and we know we don't know every last word precisely, but you have Cardinal Chappie telling us that the third secret predicts the entrance or the apostasy, and he calls it the apostasy, which refers to the Bible. The apostasy in the church begins at the top. So it begins at the top, it begins with the council, and there's other sources which I have not been able to verify entirely, but say that the third secret talks about the council and talks about the change in the Mass.
Well, Our Lady said at the beginning of the third secret, in the text that we have seen thus far, in Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc. And the Vatican published...
But Father Alonso himself says, it's clear that Father Alonso, the greatest expert on Fatima, he spent the last 16 years of his life researching. He's still got 24 volumes, of which only 22 have been published, of 5,793 documents, which they refuse to publish, and that's all there is documentation. He says the third secret refers to that the traditionalists will be vindicated by the third secret.
Traditionalists being those who want to return the church to her traditional liturgy and practices which were abandoned at Vatican II. Hey, John, don't be shy. Jump in. Come on. What do you say about this idea that the Vatican really hasn't told us about the words that follow in Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc.? They really didn't. I mean, where's the etc.?
They have not. And all the research that's been done on the third secret up to the present shows that it deals with a crisis of faith of colossal proportion. What we were given on June 26th with this vision of the Pope dressed in white being killed and the people being killed with him, that is probably part of the secret. It's not the whole thing. And even the secular press recognizes that the interpretation that the Vatican gave of this vision of a Pope being killed being fulfilled in the assassination attempt of John Paul II. Even the Washington Post on July 1st said, this is ridiculous.
Well, how can a Pope not being killed be the equivalent of a Pope that is?
Well, and they're trying to say, I mean, Cardinal Ratzinger at the time, or someone else, whether Bertoni or Ratzinger, I've forgotten, trying to say, well, because people prayed, the Blessed Virgin changed the course of the bullet. But it's not the same thing. They're talking about a group of soldiers. Okay, there's a whole group of soldiers
in the vision,
and there's a whole group of people being killed.
And it's a half-ruined city.
Yeah. And a half-ruined city.
And it's in June 20. I mean, on
June 26th.
When was it? No, the assassination.
Well, that was May 13th.
May 13th. There was a single gunman.
A single gunman, not in uniform, and not killing bishops and priests and religious and lay people. The Pope himself is shot. And of course, as anyone knows, he wasn't killed. And the other thing, so
that interpretation has pretty much been cooked up. Many people think, and rightly so. But this idea of the dogma of the faith being preserved.
Well, in fact, I'd like to come back to that for a moment, which is, I believe that that's a prophecy for the future, and that this Pope, John Benedict XVI, will be the victim of that prophecy.
We'll see.
Because if he doesn't do the consecration of Russia soon, it is what our Lord said to Sister Lucy, make it known to my ministers what's going to happen to them. Like the King of France. The King of France was executed as if he were a criminal by the soldiers of the revolution. That's what's going to happen to the Pope and to bishops. They will be executed as if they're criminals by the soldiers of the revolution.
Well, Pope Pius X is reported to have had a vision of the Pope fleeing the Vatican, running past the dead bodies of his own confreres in the Vatican. And during the Masonic revolutions in the mid-18th century, Pius IX was almost executed himself. His secretary was killed right in front of him.
Yes.
He had to flee for his life. Most people don't realize that. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
The 1800s, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think it was 1860 something. Yeah. I don't have the exact year in mind. But even non-Catholics can see that since the Second Vatican Council, since 1960, the year the Third Secret was supposed to be revealed, things are falling apart in the Catholic Church.
Well, obviously on the video itself, I mean, there's the rabbi who could see that. I mean, if it's
what about the rabbi? What is the rabbi doing in this documentary on a Catholic theme?
Well, first of all, the very simple thing is that as John Paul II himself said, the message of Fatima is addressed to every human being. That it obviously includes rabbis. Every one of us is either going to benefit or be punished by the non-fulfillment or the fulfillment of this consecration of Russia. And so he certainly has a stake in this, and he certainly understands that.
I mean, he himself said, and this is a rabbi speaking, it's a man of common sense, even if he's not a Christian, he says, look, Scripture shows that there is no chance for world peace without divine assistance.
That's great. I mean, he's certainly right, and of course we have to endorse it because that's the only way. And we've had 14,000 wars as the program started off. 14,000 wars in 6,000 years, an average of 2.5 wars per year. And the Blessed Virgin promises us peace, but if we do what she asks. But how can mankind has not been able to succeed in 6,000 years to bring peace. But what mankind has succeeded is making war worse. Now we have instruments of war that never existed before, so we can destroy all mankind. God is intervening and says, and asks the Blessed Virgin to give this message from himself, saying, here's how you have peace, and this is the only way you're going to get it.
Well,
and you have to recognize it comes from God.
Also in the message of Fatima, the thing that's not brought out enough is the fact that Our Lady said war is a punishment for sin.
That's right. Yes.
So instead of mankind and even Catholics obeying Our Lady's message, what we see is more and more sin. More and more sin institutionalized.
That's right.
And the irony is in the post-conciliar period, after Vatican II, church leaders talk about peace, and justice and harmony among men, and yet the world is more and more violent. Why? Because they're not following this simple request.
Well, in fact,
because of this whole new orientation in the church that even a rabbi can see has been bad for the church.
Well, in fact, the reason why people don't obey God is because, first of all, they don't avoid the occasions of sin, and because they don't depend on the means of grace. We need grace. We need God's help to avoid sin. And that's why Our Lady insisted pray the Rosary every day.
Well, time's running short again because these segments are short. But let's conclude with the theme of this segment. What have we got to lose by trying the consecration of Russia?
Well, that's what we were asking. I mean, every person at the end of that video said the same thing. Why not just do it? Why not just do it? Why not just do it? And this is what people should be asking their bishops. This is what people should be asking the Vatican. Why not just do it? And even if you believe it happened before, even if you believe it's been done, what's the harm of doing it again?
And doing it properly.
And doing it properly, of course. But in Portugal, the bishops consecrated Portugal in 1931, and in gratitude, they did it again.
In 1938.
In 1938.
And they were delivered from the Second World War. They never entered the Second World War because of that. Now, we have some sign of hope. The bishops of Spain this year have reconsecrated their country to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And we know the example, of course, of the Bishop of Seville.
And with good reason.
With good reason indeed. The Bishop of Seville consecrated his diocese to the Immaculate Heart of Mary in the 1930s, the only Spanish bishop to do so. That diocese was blessed because of that consecration. The Spanish Civil War took place, and there were 2 million victims, 2 million casualties in the Spanish Civil War. But in Seville, not one. That's the power and protection of the consecration of a diocese by the bishop in a solemn public ceremony. I hope all the bishops of the world would do that for their own diocese. They don't have to wait for anyone else's permission to do that, and they should do it as soon as possible, especially considering how bad the situation is getting in the world today.
But the bishops are waking up.
The bishops indeed are waking up. I've written to the bishops now over 100 times in the last 20 years, and the bishops have written back to me. Over 2,000 bishops have written back, and many of them are waking up. We know that the bishops, many of them, want to do the consecration because they've told me so. And of those bishops who've been against what we stand for, there are less than 5 who really don't want to do the consecration of Russia. Most bishops are waking up. Most bishops want to do the consecration. The problem is the Secretary of State has put an idea in the Pope's mind that the consecration will not be done because the bishops won't cooperate. We know that's false. It's important for us to pray for the bishops and to pray for the Pope so that they do the consecration before it's too late for all of us.
We've got about a minute left, but you said something in the documentary. Let's conclude with this thought. You said, look, in times like this, when there's crisis of authority, the laity have the right to bypass church authorities, go right to the Pope. And you mentioned how at Fatima itself, first it was, 50 people, then it was 5,000, then 15,000, then 30,000, then 70,000 ultimately showed up, just because of the word of mouth among the lay faithful.
Yeah.
And can't we do the same in the church?
Well, people certainly,
a grassroots movement.
Certainly, first the 50 people in June told the 5,000 in July, who turned into be the 70,000 in October, and that was all by word of mouth against the opposition of the clergy and of the government and of the newspapers.
And during the Arian crisis in the 4th century, when almost the whole church seemed to have succumbed to the Arian heresy, they were denying that Christ was literally the Son of God. It was the laity that kept the faith better than most of the clergy. So maybe we can close on that thought. You know, if you're a member of the laity, even if you're a non-Catholic lay person in some other church, contact Catholic authorities.
Well,
and say, look, we have nothing to lose from doing this consecration.
And
whether you believe it or not.
Get a copy of this video. I mean, get a copy of the video. You can see and pass it on. Show it to your friends and neighbors. Show it to them and get them to get in touch with their. It took 300 lay people in one diocese to get their bishop to talk to the Pope about this. If 300 people in every diocese talk to their bishop, that the Pope would be saying, "Look, hey, all these bishops want to do it. Why not?" But if we don't speak up, it's our own fault that we have the leadership we have.
Well, we're out of time on today's segment, but that is the message for every one of us. If you're out there and you believe in the message of Fatima, or even if you don't believe in it, you think there's a reasonable chance or even a remote chance that it could produce the benefits promised by Our Lady of Fatima, beseech church authorities to do something about it.
Thank you for joining us on The Truth in Crisis for the conclusion of Heaven's Key to Peace. Remember to pray the Rosary every day. Please consider asking a friend to watch with you next week. Until then, I'm Don Pinnell. God bless you.
Our Lady of Fatima said, "If my requests are granted, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If my requests are not granted, Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, raising up wars and persecutions against the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer. Various nations will be annihilated." For more information, please call us at our toll-free number 1-888-FATIMA-1. That's 1-888-328-4621. You can also find out more on our website, www.fatima.org.